On a bitterly cold morning, with frost crystallizing on every window pane, Adam stepped onto his creaking porch and found, to his astonishment, a trembling Labrador pleading for shelter at his front door. The dog's breath came in ragged puffs, each exhalation forming a faint white cloud in the frigid air, hinting at how long it must have waited outside with diminishing hope. Concerned by the pitiful sight, Adam knelt down, gently touched the Labrador's icy fur, and felt a surge of compassion that vanquished any hesitation about inviting a strange animal inside. The Labrador gazed up at him with wide, pleading eyes, one paw tentatively scratching at the door, as though it understood that warmth and safety lay just beyond the threshold. Adam fumbled with his keys in numb fingers, managing to unlock the door while the relentless winter wind whipped around him, driving the cold deeper into his bones. With a soft grunt of effort, he scooped the dog into his arms, astonished by how light it felt, as if the cold and hunger had stripped away most of its body mass. Once inside, he gently placed the Labrador on a threadbare rug, its paws slipping slightly on the worn fabric as it tried to steady itself, still shivering from head to tail. Adam hurried to shut out the biting wind, sliding the old door closed with a resounding thud that seemed to echo the finality of his decision to care for this unexpected visitor. Determined to help the dog recover from its ordeal, he rushed to stoke the fireplace, flames soon crackling and casting quivering shadows across the walls of his humble living room. From a small cabinet, he retrieved a thick blanket, which he gently draped over the Labrador's shaking frame, hoping to stave off the brutal chill that clung to its bones. The dog let out a soft whimper, lowering its muzzle onto its paws, as if relieved to finally feel a hint of warmth after endless hours in the unforgiving cold. Adam observed it closely, noting the patches of frost still clinging to its whiskers and fur, a haunting reminder of the danger just outside his door. Searching for any sign of identification, he carefully felt around the dog's neck, discovering a worn collar that bore faint markings, nearly impossible to read. He peered at the collar in the firelight, tilting it at various angles in hopes of deciphering a name, phone number, or address that might explain how it ended up on his porch. The dog stared at him with an expression that mingled gratitude and desperation, silently imploring him not to abandon it to the chill of the world beyond. Adam could not resist patting its head with a comforting hand, speaking softly to calm its evident distress, though he was uncertain if it truly understood his words. He found a bowl in his kitchen and filled it with lukewarm water, carefully offering it to the shivering Labrador, whose tongue lapped at the liquid with ravenous thirst. A pang of guilt struck him as he realized how long it must have gone without sustenance, forced to endure the bitter cold with neither food nor comfort. Determined to do more, he checked his meager pantry and retrieved a can of chicken broth, which he warmed on a sputtering stovetop to create a simple meal. Once cooled, he placed the bowl before the Labrador, watching as it sniffed hesitantly before gulping down the broth, its tail weakly thumping against the ragged rug. Adam's heart ached to see how eagerly it devoured even the modest portion, evidence that it had been starved, perhaps wandering aimlessly for days. The dog trembled still, so he coaxed it closer to the fireplace, where the flames cast flickers of orange and gold across its weary eyes, reflecting the glimmer of hope now taking root. Determined to discern the collar's faint markings, Adam fetched a magnifying glass from his desk, shining a flashlight onto the collar's battered surface in the firelit gloom. Through careful inspection, he discerned the word Lucky etched in weathered letters, though no phone number or address remained legible beneath the scratches. The name struck him as tragically ironic, given the dog's dire predicament, yet he chose to believe it signified a promise of better fortune ahead. Wanting to check for injuries, he ran his hands gently along the Labrador's body, discovering several bruises and raw patches where the fur had been rubbed away by ice. Each sign of suffering fueled his resolve to nurse Lucky back to health, regardless of the strain on his limited resources and solitary existence. Memories of his own hardships flooded Adam's mind, nights spent wrestling with the loneliness of an empty home, challenges at work that left him doubting himself, and the quiet ache of yearning for companionship. Seeing Lucky now, helpless and fearful, stirred in him a fierce protectiveness, as though saving this dog might also mend the cracks in his own life. While the wind hammered mercilessly at the outside walls, Adam set about making his living room more comfortable, positioning cushions near the fire and setting fresh logs to ensure lasting warmth. Lucky, though still trembling, followed him with watchful eyes, the faint wag of a tail betraying the faint spark of trust that had begun to bloom. In the flickering glow, man and dog shared a tentative bond, a fragile alliance forged by desperation and buoyed by an unspoken mutual understanding. After a time, Lucky managed to stand and pace unsteadily around the cramped living room, sniffing at the worn furniture and the corners where dust motes swirled. Adam observed with a mix of relief and empathy, hoping this slow exploration signaled progress toward recovery, no matter how slight. Eager to ensure Lucky's comfort for the night, he moved the couch closer to the fireplace and arranged a soft towel where the Labrador could curl up and rest. Still wrapped in the blanket, Lucky sank onto the makeshift bed, the furrow of worry in its eyes gradually softening as the heat from the fire seeped into stiff muscles. Adam realized he, too, needed rest, but he could not bear to leave Lucky's side, so he pulled a chair close and settled in with a thick quilt draped over his shoulders. In those quiet hours, as the storm continued to roar beyond the walls, Adam felt an unspoken promise take shape, vowing that he would unravel the dog's past and restore its spirit. The only sounds were the crackle of embers in the fireplace and Lucky's breathing, which steadied bit by bit, as though the warmth and kindness were vanquishing the lingering chill of despair. Neither man nor dog realized it yet, but their intertwined fates had already set in motion a remarkable chain of events, the first chapter of a story that would soon unfold in astonishing ways. Early the next morning, Adam woke to find Lucky curled up close to the dwindling embers of the fireplace, its soft snores occasionally broken by faint whimpers from some distant dream. Although Adam's night had been fitful, marked by worry and a howling wind, he felt a resolute surge of determination as he watched the Labrador stir beneath the tattered blanket. A thin dawn light crept through the curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced above a half-burnt logs, casting long shadows across the cluttered living room. Adam approached quietly, hesitant to disturb the brief respite Lucky seemed to enjoy, yet wanting to check for any lingering signs of frostbite or injury. With care, he knelt down, laying a hand gently on the dog's flank and feeling the steady rhythm of its breathing, relieved that it seemed calmer than the night before. Though the cabin remained chilled by the fading coals, the difference from the brutal cold outside was unmistakable, and Adam hoped Lucky's recovery would continue with consistent warmth. Rising to his feet, he added fresh logs to the embers, coaxing new flames to life in a crackling display that brought a wave of modest heat back into the small space. Lucky twitched an ear, slowly opening one eye in response to the renewed radiance, then shifted into a more comfortable position, as if appreciating Adam's efforts. Deciding that sustenance would help the dog's recovery, Adam rummaged through his sparse cupboards, aware that his supplies were far from plentiful. He managed to unearth a sealed bag of rice, a can of chicken broth, and a half-eaten loaf of bread which he had been saving for his own meager meals. A pang of guilt surfaced as he realized he would have to share these limited rations, but the thought of letting Lucky go hungry weighed more heavily than his own hunger. Setting a pot atop his small electric stove, Adam combined water, a cup of rice, and some broth, stirring absent-mindedly while his mind drifted to the mystery of the dog's presence. As the makeshift porridge simmered, he wondered who might have owned Lucky before, how the dog had come to be so desperate, and whether there was anyone searching frantically at that very moment. A memory of the collar's faded inscription, Lucky, surfaced, reinforcing the growing conviction that this dog had once belonged to a loving home now seemingly lost. He glanced over at Lucky, who thumped its tail softly against the rug upon meeting Adam's gaze, seeming to share some unspoken gratitude for the safe harbor provided. Once the rice finished cooking, Adam carefully spooned a small portion into a bowl and diluted it with cooled broth, mindful of Lucky's strained condition. The aroma must have reached the Labrador's nose, for it stood shakily, patting over on stiff legs and nudging at Adam's arm as though to say thank you. Observing Lucky's weakness, Adam realized that the dog had likely gone days with minimal nourishment, an ordeal no living creature should ever endure. He set the bowl down gently, staying close to ensure that Lucky didn't choke or eat too quickly in its voracious appetite. The dog lapped at the food with evident relief, its once ravenous urgency tempered now by the knowledge that this helping hand would not suddenly vanish. Watching Lucky eat, Adam felt an unexpected warmth fill his chest, as though acting as caretaker gave new meaning to his otherwise isolated life. After a time, he stroked Lucky's back, whispering words of encouragement as the last remnants of the makeshift meal disappeared from the bowl. The dog let out a satisfied sigh, settling down by the fire and resting its muzzle on crossed paws, its eyes fluttering shut in a sign of cautious contentment. With Lucky momentarily at ease, Adam seized the opportunity to inspect the collar again, this time under the brighter morning light that filtered into the room. He squinted at the worn leather, tracing each crack with a finger, seeking a phone number or address, but found only the faint marks that spelled out the dog's name. Disappointment nudged at him. Without more information, returning Lucky to whoever might still be looking was nothing but a distant hope. Undeterred, he resolved to do everything within his modest means to aid the dog's convalescence, from feeding it regularly to monitoring each step of its recovery. Memories of how Lucky had gazed at him the previous night surfaced, a silent plea that resonated with Adam's own experiences of being overlooked in times of need. Collecting himself, he checked the weather forecast on a small radio, but all he could discern through the crackling static was that temperatures would remain punishingly low. With a frown, he wondered if traveling to a nearby town for medical help would even be feasible, given the snowdrifts that routinely buried the narrow road in winter. Opening his phone, he scanned through his limited contacts, contemplating whether to call a local veterinarian, but he knew that service in these remote parts was painfully unreliable. A half-formed plan began to take shape in his mind. Wait for the weather to ease, then venture into town with Lucky in tow and ask around for any missing dog notices. He pictured the anxious faces of people who might be desperately seeking their beloved pet and resolved that if such owners existed, he would find them. However, a small voice in the back of his mind confessed that part of him hoped to keep Lucky, a companion that brightened the dark corners of his solitary days. Uncertain of what tomorrow might hold, Adam decided to remain practical, devoting the day to nursing Lucky's health back to a more stable footing. He rummaged through his rarely used first aid kit and found some antiseptic wipes, gauze, and ointment, which he cautiously applied to the raw patches on the dog's legs. Though Lucky tensed at first, a reassuring pat from Adam calmed the dog, who seemed to accept the gentle ministrations with a shaky sort of trust. By afternoon, Lucky had fallen into a doze, lulled by the soft crackle of the fireplace, and Adam busied himself with tidying the cramped cabin to clear a safe space for the dog to rest. With each piece of clutter stowed away, Adam felt as though he was not merely organizing his home, but also sweeping out the old cobwebs of his own solitude. As dusk approached, a subdued hush fell upon the little home, and the flickering shadows on the walls bore witness to a quiet alliance, man and dog, on the threshold of an extraordinary journey neither had foreseen. The following morning brought a sudden lull in the biting winds, and Adam peered through his frosted window, noting with cautious optimism that the snowfall had eased overnight. Lucky still slept by the hearth, breathing in soft, even patterns that suggested a measure of recovery, though Adam could see the dog's ribs faintly outlined beneath its coat. An uncharacteristic stillness filled the cabin, and for a moment Adam felt a serene hush settle over his thoughts, like a gentle reminder that nothing was irreversible. Determined to build on Lucky's fragile progress, he rummaged through his drawers until he found a threadbare leash that once belonged to his late uncle's dog years ago. Though the collar Lucky wore was serviceable, Adam believed a proper leash would lend them both security should they need to step outside for exercise or a short walk. Before he could venture outdoors with Lucky, however, Adam knew it was vital to check the road conditions, for the memory of past winter storms made him wary of unseen hazards. Carefully, he donned his heaviest coat, bracing against the lingering cold, then cracked the door open to gauge the path leading from his remote property to the main road. The snowdrifts were still formidable, but in certain spots they had settled enough that a careful trek might be possible, though any miscalculation could mean getting stranded. Returning inside, Adam removed his boots and approached Lucky, who stirred groggily, ears twitching in response to the sound of the howling wind slipping through the gap in the door. Gently, Adam knelt and passed a soothing hand over the dog's ears, murmuring quiet reassurances that together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. He carefully attached the newly found leash to Lucky's collar, wondering if the dog would resist restraint, but Lucky only looked at him with subdued curiosity. Adam felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, as though this simple act symbolized the trust Lucky had already placed in him. Unsure how far the Labrador could walk, he coaxed Lucky to his feet, guiding the dog slowly across the living room to test its balance on the worn floorboards. Though Lucky limped a bit, the dog followed willingly, tail curling in a tentative wag that spoke of cautious confidence in Adam's support. Satisfied with the dog's stability, Adam decided a brief outing was in order, just enough to let Lucky stretch and perhaps gauge how feasible a trip to town might be. The first blast of frigid air made them both flinch as he eased open the door, revealing the stark whiteness of a world blanketed in relentless winter. Step by step, Adam led Lucky beyond the porch, their feet sinking into the snow until he found a firmer path where the drifts had been tamped down by the previous storms. Lucky sniffed at the powdery mounds, exhaling small puffs of steam, and Adam felt a pang of empathy for the dog's recent ordeal in this unforgiving environment. They didn't stray far from the cabin, for Adam remained ever mindful of Lucky's fragile condition and the unpredictability of the winter weather. A piercing wind gust made them both shiver, but Lucky pressed on resolutely, pausing now and then to look back at Adam as if to say it was all right to continue. After several minutes of cautious pacing, Adam noticed a hint of fatigue in Lucky's step, so he guided the dog in a slow arc back toward the cabin's humble silhouette. Once inside, they shook off the lingering chill, Adam's teeth chattering as he helped Lucky free of the leash, his heart pounding with relief that the small trip had gone well. Determined not to overexert the Labrador, Adam patted the dog's flank, then rewarded Lucky with a bowl of lukewarm water and a modest helping of leftover broth to restore spent energy. While Lucky ate, Adam rechecked the local forecast on his crackling radio, though most of the broadcast was a wash of static and distant voices impossible to decipher. There was no telling whether the nearest veterinarian had reopened or if roads remained blocked, but Adam felt a growing urge to at least try making inquiries. The thought of Lucky's possible owners haunted him, conjuring images of frantic people posting flyers, combing snowy streets, or waiting anxiously by a silent phone. Adam recalled the only veterinarian's clinic in town, a modest place with single waiting room, staffed by a kindly older man who always had a treat in his pocket. If the path were clear enough, Adam reasoned, he could bring Lucky to that clinic, perhaps learning more about the dog's injuries or scanning for a microchip. The decision weighed on him, for he feared what might happen if travel conditions suddenly worsened, leaving them stranded halfway with no refuge in sight. Still, every glance at the dog's uncertain eyes firmed Adam's resolve, a reminder that waiting passively could mean losing precious time to reunite Lucky with a rightful family. As the afternoon light waned, Adam used a battered shovel to clear a bit more of the path outside, each motion sending plumes of frost swirling into the brittle air. Lucky watched from the doorway, the tip of its tail wagging as though cheering Adam on, a silent testament to the bond that had sprouted between them. Exhausted by the physical exertion, Adam finally set the shovel aside, wiping sweat from his brow despite the near-freezing temperature. He looked back at the cabin, which until recently had been his solitary retreat from the world, now transformed into a place of quiet companionship. By dusk, he had cleared enough snow that he believed a cautious drive to town might be possible if the weather held, though doubt still gnawed at him. Lucky seemed to sense the shift in Adam's mood, patting over to nuzzle his leg, and Adam ruffled the dog's ears, grateful for the gentle encouragement. That night, as wind once again rattled the windows, Adam spent long hours by the fire, pondering the risks of leaving the safety of the cabin, weighed against the urgency of Lucky's situation. He meticulously planned his route and made a mental checklist of everything they would need: blankets, extra food, water, the leash, and whatever medical supplies might fit in a small bag. Lucky slept at his feet, the dog's rhythmic breathing lulling him in and out of worry, until finally he drifted into a shallow rest, dreaming of clearer roads and open possibilities. By morning, one thing was certain: Adam would do whatever it took to safeguard Lucky's future. For sometimes the only way to find the missing pieces of our own story is to help another put theirs back together. Dawn broke with a pallid glow filtering through the window panes, illuminating the cabin in a soft hush that made everything feel momentarily calm. Adam stirred from his makeshift bed near the fireplace, blinking sleep from his eyes and acknowledging that today would be pivotal for both him and Lucky. A renewed chill lingered in the air, reminding him that despite the gentler weather, the winter's bite was far from gone. He glanced over at Lucky, who, sensing his wakefulness, lifted its head with a faint wag of the tail, still subdued yet noticeably more alert than before. Determined to keep his promise of seeking professional help, Adam set about preparing for the potentially treacherous drive to the nearest town. First, he checked the radio for any updated forecasts, but only the usual static-laced broadcast greeted him, offering scant details. Undeterred, he packed a small duffel bag with supplies: extra blankets, bottled water, a thermos of hot tea, and some leftover rice broth for Lucky. The dog watched intently as Adam moved around the cramped living room, tail swishing in a hopeful rhythm that suggested it sensed the plan unfolding. Next, Adam approached the ancient wood stove in the corner, carefully banking the coals so the fire would remain low but alive in case they returned late. Once he finished tidying up, he carefully slipped Lucky's leash onto the worn collar, pausing to check for any raw spots that might be irritated by the strap. To his relief, the dog only flinched slightly, suggesting its injuries were still healing but not as painful as before. Clad in his warmest coat, Adam pulled open the front door and took a tentative step onto the porch, scanning the dazzling expanse of snow for signs of a clear path. A brisk wind nipped at his cheeks, but the drifts looked more manageable than the previous day, fueling a cautious sense of optimism. With Lucky close behind, Adam trudged across the property to where his old truck lay, half buried in a bank of powder. It took several minutes of shoveling around the vehicle's tires before he could even attempt to start the engine, each scoop of snow sending a fine spray drifting into the frosty air. Lucky sniffed at the freshly cleared ground, occasionally letting out an inquisitive bark that echoed in the stillness of the morning. Adam forced the driver's side door open with a groan, the hinges complaining loudly against the cold, and slipped behind the wheel. The truck coughed on the first turn of the key, sputtering into a reluctant rumble that threatened to stall until Adam gently pressed the accelerator. Satisfied that the engine was at least running, he slid over, coaxing Lucky to hop into the passenger seat, where a blanket awaited to keep the dog warm. As he pulled onto the narrow path leading away from the cabin, Adam gripped the steering wheel with both hands, every muscle tense with the knowledge that one misstep could lead to disaster. The tires crunched through the icy ruts, occasionally slipping, but he managed to keep the truck steady, fighting the urge to clench his jaw too tightly. In the passenger seat, Lucky peered out the window, ears perked and breath fogging the glass, as though marveling at the unfamiliar surroundings. A few miles in, they passed a stretch of road littered with broken branches and ice-coated debris, evidence of the storm's ferocity. Adam had to slow to a near crawl, carefully navigating the makeshift obstacle course, heart pounding whenever the tires threatened to lose traction. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged onto a more maintained portion of roadway, where the plow had made a pass, though ragged walls of snow still loomed on either side. Grateful for the improved path, Adam gradually increased speed, mindful that black ice could lurk anywhere in the shadows. Lucky shifted in the seat, resting its head on Adam's arm as if to offer silent reassurance that they were in this together. At last, faint silhouettes of rooftops and telephone poles materialized on the horizon, signaling the outskirts of town, though it was still eerily quiet beneath the winter's hush. The few buildings they passed looked shuttered, windows dark, as if the residents had yet to stir or simply chosen to remain indoors. Adam parked in front of a small, weathered building marked by a faded sign depicting a dog and a cat, the local veterinary clinic. He cut the engine and exhaled a shaky breath, suddenly aware of how tightly wound his nerves had become during the perilous drive. Lucky waited patiently as Adam climbed out, then carefully hopped down onto the flattened snow, sniffing at the ground with measured curiosity. Through the clinic's glass door, Adam could see a single light on in the reception area, kindling hope that the vet might be open despite the harsh season. A bell tinkled overhead as he pushed the door open, ushering Lucky inside to the warm, antiseptic-smelling interior that contrasted sharply with the cold outside. Behind a small desk, a bespectacled older man, whom Adam recognized as Dr. Whitfield, looked up in mild surprise at the unexpected arrival. Apologizing for the abrupt entrance, Adam explained Lucky's condition, the frostbite scare, possible malnourishment, and the faded collar offering no clue but the dog's name. Dr. Whitfield listened intently, then beckoned them into an examination room, where a single overhead lamp illuminated a stainless steel table. With a calm, practiced hand, the veterinarian assessed Lucky's vital signs, offering gentle praise when the dog remained relatively cooperative despite lingering fears. After a thorough once-over, Dr. Whitfield nodded and confirmed that with proper care and continued nutrition, Lucky stood an excellent chance of a complete recovery. Relieved, Adam felt his heart lift. Though the mystery of Lucky's past remained unsolved, he knew in that moment they'd taken the first crucial step toward a brighter future. Dr. Whitfield retrieved a small flashlight and examined Lucky's eyes, murmuring softly about possible past traumas, but expressing hope that the dog's vision seemed unimpaired. Adam stood by anxiously, hands clasped together, watching as the veterinarian gently pressed around Lucky's ribs to check for any bruising or hidden injuries. Lucky remained impressively calm throughout, the only sign of distress being a slight tremble whenever Dr. Whitfield lifted a paw or probed a tender area. After several minutes, the doctor paused, scribbling down a few notes on a clipboard, then turned to Adam with a reassuring nod. "Overall, I'm amazed at how resilient this dog is," he remarked, one eyebrow arched in mild astonishment at Lucky's fortitude despite the recent ordeal. Relief coursed through Adam, and he exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, the tension of the morning's journey dissipating like melting frost. Dr. Whitfield guided them to a small scale in the corner of the examination room, coaxing Lucky onto it to gauge how much weight the dog had lost during its time in the cold. As he read the numbers, the veterinarian clucked his tongue, noting that Lucky was indeed underweight but should regain normal mass with steady meals and rest. The fluorescent light glinted off the metal surfaces, and Adam caught sight of his own weary reflection in a glass cabinet, reminders of sleepless nights etched beneath his eyes. Unable to shake the mystery of Lucky's origins, Adam cleared his throat and asked if the clinic had any reports of missing dogs matching Lucky's description. Dr. Whitfield sighed, explaining that while some owners posted flyers or called in about lost pets, none specifically mentioned a Labrador named Lucky in the last few months. Undeterred, Adam suggested scanning Lucky for a microchip, clinging to the slim hope that modern technology might solve the riddle of the dog's past. Nodding in agreement, the veterinarian fetched a handheld scanner, then ran it gently over Lucky's shoulders and back, the device emitting intermittent beeps. They waited, hearts pounding with a nervous anticipation, but the scanner remained stubbornly silent, failing to register any implanted chip. Disappointment flickered across Adam's face, and he absently patted Lucky's head, as if to convey that their search would not end here. Ever the optimist, Dr. Whitfield suggested that Adam leave a photo of Lucky on the clinic's bulletin board, just in case someone recognized the dog or had heard a similar story. Grateful for even that slim avenue, Adam promised to return with a proper picture, though he currently had none beyond the mental image he carried in his heart. The veterinarian then went over a basic regimen for Lucky's continued care: high-protein meals, plenty of clean water, and gradual increases in physical activity to rebuild strength. Adam listened intently, scribbling notes on a scrap of paper, determined to provide Lucky with every advantage in regaining full health. As Dr. Whitfield wrapped up the exam, he gently squeezed Lucky's paw and chuckled. "This one's got a spirit that won't quit, that's for sure." Taking his cue, Adam gave Lucky a proud scratch behind the ears, marveling at how far the dog had come since that fateful moment on his porch. After settling the modest consultation fee, what little Adam could spare, he gathered his belongings and guided Lucky back to the waiting room. A lone receptionist behind the counter, bundled in a thick sweater, glanced up and offered a polite smile, though her eyes flickered with curiosity at the bedraggled pair. Adam paused to inquire about any local animal shelters, hoping that if he didn't find Lucky's owners soon, perhaps there were leads there. The receptionist flipped through a binder of resources, shaking her head with regret. "I'm afraid most are at capacity or lacking winter funding. It's a rough season." Adam thanked her anyway, scribbling down a few phone numbers in case he needed them, all the while mentally reaffirming that he would not abandon Lucky to an overcrowded shelter. With a final nod of thanks to Dr. Whitfield, Adam pushed the door open, letting in a gust of cold air that ruffled Lucky's fur. The sunlight outside felt brighter compared to the sterile fluorescence inside, creating a stark contrast that made both man and dog squint as they stepped onto the snowy sidewalk. Nudging Lucky gently, Adam led the way to his old truck, urging the dog to hop back in so they could explore any other possible leads around town. He pondered the bulletin boards at the local grocery store and post office, places where missing pet notices often appeared alongside job listings and community events. Although the roads remained risky, Adam felt more confident after surviving the trek here. A cautious drive around the vicinity might yield new clues. Lucky settled onto the seat with a resigned sigh, as though preparing for the next leg of a journey whose destination was still shrouded in uncertainty. The engine coughed to life once more, and Adam navigated the slightly busier streets of town, passing a handful of bundled pedestrians bracing against the wind. Finding a small parking spot outside the grocery store, he slid out of the truck and glanced around, noticing how few cars dotted the wintry landscape. Adam coaxed Lucky onto the sidewalk, the leash tight in his hand, then entered the store's cramped foyer where an old corkboard displayed faded announcements. Carefully, he scanned each yellowed paper and handwritten note, searching for any mention of a lost Labrador, anything that might match Lucky's description. Disappointment tugged at him again. The board held only dated flyers for garage sales, babysitting services, and a missing tabby cat from several months back. Undeterred, he took out a notepad and jotted a quick notice about Lucky, tearing off the page and pinning it in an empty corner of the board. As he gazed at the makeshift flyer, he felt an odd pang of longing, part of him hoping someone would claim Lucky soon, another part fearing the day he might have to say goodbye. With his new companion at his side, Adam stepped back into the frigid air, silently vowing to do everything possible to ensure Lucky's story found the next hopeful chapter it deserved. After pinning his makeshift flyer on the grocery store's crowded bulletin board, Adam decided to check another local spot renowned for community notices, the aging post office at the edge of town. He navigated the slippery roads with care, the truck's tires grinding over patches of ice and packed snow as Lucky occasionally glanced out the window with curious eyes. The daylight, though pale and filtered through a steely sky, provided enough visibility for Adam to avoid the worst of the treacherous drifts that lined the narrow streets. Upon arriving at the post office, a squat cinder-block structure that had seen better days, Adam parked near the entrance and turned off the sputtering engine. Lucky hopped down onto the snowbank with a bit more confidence than before, shaking off the chill before following Adam into the small lobby. The scent of old paper and adhesive mingled with the stale winter air inside, and a lone ceiling fan clicked overhead, half-heartedly stirring the warmth from a corner heater. A gray-haired clerk greeted them from behind a tall counter, her expression brightening at the sight of Lucky, who wagged his tail timidly. Adam explained their situation, offering the same story he had repeated at the veterinary clinic and grocery store, how he found Lucky shivering on his porch, and how no one seemed to recognize the dog. The clerk listened sympathetically, then stepped around the counter to inspect the worn collar, letting Lucky sniff her hand in a gentle introduction. Adam asked if anyone in town had inquired after a missing Labrador, hoping for the smallest hint that Lucky's real owners might still be out there searching. The clerk shook her head regretfully, saying she hadn't heard a word about any lost dog, though she agreed to keep an eye out for any new postings or mail requests that might fit the description. She directed Adam to a battered bulletin board at the end of the lobby, which displayed a few old notices about local events, yard sales, and stray animals from previous months. As he scanned the pinned papers, Adam's gaze settled on a single faded flyer for a missing husky, dated from over a year ago, a reminder that not all lost pets were found quickly, or at all. Resolving to leave another note here, he scratched a brief description of Lucky onto a scrap of paper, carefully pinning it next to the defunct husky flyer, hoping someone might spot it soon. The clerk offered a small smile of encouragement, praising Adam for his dedication and promising to mention Lucky to any patrons who came in with a similar inquiry. Thanking her, Adam led Lucky back outside, shielding his face from a sudden gust of wind that whipped across the parking lot like an icy lash. The cold stung his cheeks, and for a moment he hesitated, uncertain whether to continue roaming the town or head back to the familiar warmth of his cabin. Seeing Lucky's patient gaze, Adam felt a surge of resolve. He wasn't ready to give up, especially when any small lead might be the key to unraveling the dog's past. They climbed back into the truck, and Adam started the engine once more, scanning the sparse traffic and wondering if any passers-by might recognize Lucky. Driving slowly along the main drag, he noticed a handful of pedestrians trudging through slushy sidewalks, bundled in heavy coats, faces half hidden by scarves. Pulling the truck to a cautious stop, he rolled down his window and greeted one passerby, a stooped older man with a cane, politely asking if he had seen or heard of a lost Labrador. The man shook his head, apologizing for not having any information, but patted Lucky's head through the open window and wished them luck in their search. Disappointed but grateful for the man's kindness, Adam continued down the street, eyes peeled for anything that might spark recognition. Lucky, sensing Adam's unease, rested a gentle paw on his arm, as though offering reassurance that their bond would endure, regardless of the answers they found. Spotting a small cafe at the corner with lights aglow, Adam decided to park once again, tempted by the prospect of a warm drink and possibly more local gossip. The cafe's doorbell jingled as they entered, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries a welcome contrast to the biting cold outside. A middle-aged barista behind the counter flashed them a friendly smile, momentarily startled by the sight of a dog but softening upon seeing Lucky's calm demeanor. Adam inquired whether pets were allowed, ready to turn around if necessary, but the barista waved off his concern, saying business was slow and a friendly dog was no bother. He ordered a steaming mug of cocoa, checking his wallet to ensure he had enough small bills to cover it, while Lucky settled at his feet, tail thumping softly against the tiled floor. Between sips of chocolatey warmth, Adam asked about missing pets, reciting the familiar story of finding Lucky on his porch during the storm. The barista shook her head, but promised to spread the word, even offering to put a note on the cafe's window, where regulars might see it. Accepting her kind gesture, Adam scribbled another short description, leaving a contact number he'd purchased online for this purpose, to avoid sharing his personal home line with strangers. As he taped it to the cafe's front window, he noticed Lucky watching him with an air of expectancy, as though waiting to see what new corner of town they might explore next. Emerging into the cold once more, Adam steeled himself against a sudden wave of exhaustion, realizing how draining the search had become. The day was only half spent, yet it felt as though they'd walked every inch of the small town, gathering only well wishes and sympathetic shrugs in return. Though no new leads had surfaced, Adam refused to label the day a failure. The community now knew about Lucky's plight, and perhaps that awareness would yield something soon. With a weary nod, he guided Lucky back to the truck, determined to revisit the vet's office before returning home, just in case Dr. Whitfield had received any calls. Glancing at the sky, he noticed streaks of pale gold emerging from the gray, a timid sunset promising that nightfall was near and time was running short. Lucky, shivering slightly, huddled against him as they climbed in, the dog's grateful gaze reminding Adam of the small triumphs they had already achieved: warmth, safety, and an unbreakable bond. Cranking the engine to life one final time, Adam allowed himself a hopeful thought. Though the path was uncertain, he and Lucky would see it through, step by determined step, until the past and future converged.